In nations where leaving Islam can mean exile or death, millions claim to have risked everything for a faith built on grace. Not fear, trading rituals for the assurance that Jesus offered. The movement is spreading in secret, fueled by visions and miracles. Why are so many former Muslims marking this perilous path? And what exactly did they see that changed everything? A Syrian woman lay motionless in a hospital bed, paralyzed by a massive stroke. Doctors offered little hope. Family gathered, bracing for the worst. Then, in the silence of her room, she described seeing a man in white standing beside her bed. He spoke her name and said he had come to heal her for his glory. She recognized him from childhood stories, Jesus, a figure she had known only distantly from her Muslim upbringing. When he reached out and touched her hand, sensation flooded back into her body. She sat up, then stood, feeling strength return to the limbs that had been lifeless for days. The medical staff, stunned, could not explain her sudden recovery. For her, the experience was more than a miracle. It was an invitation. That night she searched for answers, driven by a need to understand who this Jesus was and why he had chosen her. In her world, dreams and visions carry deep meaning, often seen as messages from God. This encounter launched her on a journey that would challenge everything she had ever believed. An Egyptian man once celebrated every attack on Christians, convinced he was defending his faith. Years spent burning churches and tormenting believers left him haunted by a question he could never answer. How much was enough to earn God's approval? He poured himself into rituals, fasting, memorizing sacred texts, punishing his own body, yet peace stayed just out of reach. In the night, sleep brought a dream unlike any he had known. A man in dazzling white appeared, radiating a presence that felt both familiar and terrifying. The figure spoke plainly, saying, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." The words echoed, cutting through years of anxiety. He woke up gasping, a weight he'd carried since childhood, suddenly gone. The world outside his window seemed brighter, colors sharper. He found a Bible online, desperate to understand what he had experienced. As he read, the idea of salvation as a gift, unearned and freely given, filled him with relief. For the first time, he felt certain he was loved, not for what he could achieve, but for who he was. A teenager in Pakistan once set out to prove Christianity false by burning a Bible and the Quran. The Quran burned easily, but when he tried to burn the Bible, it struck his chest and knocked him to the ground. Surrounded by what he described as spiritual fire, he saw a vision of Jesus telling him to preach the gospel. That moment changed his life. The same young man who had challenged Christians and mocked their faith began leading secret gatherings, sharing the story of his encounter and teaching others about Jesus. Underground networks soon formed around him, drawing in people hungry for answers. In another corner of the world, a former jihadist scholar who once trained others in religious warfare now leads a ministry that supports new Christian converts in hiding. These leaders, once fierce opponents of Christianity, now risk everything to help others find the same hope they discovered. Their stories echo across borders, fueling a movement that grows in the shadows. In 13 countries, renouncing Islam carries a legal death sentence. Apostasy laws stand on the books from Iran and Saudi Arabia to Somalia and Pakistan, enforced by courts that rarely show mercy. In Iran, the threat of punishment is not just theoretical. Every year, over 100 people are imprisoned for their religious beliefs, many accused of abandoning Islam or attending underground church meetings. Judges hold the power to impose the death penalty at their discretion, often without public trial or appeal. Families, too, become enforcers of these laws. Fathers have turned in their own children for praying to Jesus. Siblings report one another, hoping to avoid suspicion themselves. The consequences reach far beyond the courtroom. Converts describe being beaten by relatives, forced from their homes, or cut off entirely from their communities. The men risk particular danger, facing both legal charges and violence inside their own families. The price for even a whispered prayer or a hidden Bible is constant fear of arrest, of torture, of losing every relationship that once defined their world. In this environment, faith becomes an act of defiance, and every step toward Christianity is shadowed by the possibility of prison or worse. In Iran, the numbers tell a story the authorities can no longer control. Senior clerics admit that tens of thousands of mosques now stand empty, their doors locked and prayer halls silent. Official figures once boasted over 75,000 mosques across the country, but local reports suggest as many as 2/3 have closed due to plummeting attendance. Surveys conducted by independent researchers outside Iran point to a dramatic shift in religious identity. In one study, only 40% of respondents identified as Muslim, a sharp departure from the near-universal adherence reported a generation ago. Some estimates place the number of Christian converts in Iran at nearly 1 million, though the true figure remains hidden by secrecy and fear. The government's response has grown more desperate. Authorities raid underground gatherings, confiscate Bibles, and threaten families of suspected converts. Yet the movement continues to grow, fueled by encrypted messaging apps, satellite broadcasts, and word of mouth. The consequences for those caught are severe. In recent years, documented cases show Iranian Christian converts deported from Western countries back to Iran, despite clear evidence of the dangers they face. One anonymous deportee spent months in detention before being sent back, his attorney warning that a return to Iran meant certain arrest or worse. These stories reveal a nation in flux, where the old certainties are crumbling and new identities are being forged under extraordinary pressure. Encrypted messaging apps have become lifelines for those seeking answers in places where faith can cost everything. In Iran, Afghanistan, and beyond, secret online studies connect isolated believers, allowing them to read the Bible, ask questions, and share prayers without exposing their identities. Some networks operate as underground seminaries, training new leaders through secure video calls, voice notes, and digital coursework. These lessons move from phone to phone, crossing borders and city walls that would be impossible to breach in person. Satellite television beams Christian teachings into millions of homes, reaching even the most remote villages. In regions where the internet is tightly controlled, radio waves slip past government censors. One listener in Afghanistan described hearing for the first time that God loves people unconditionally. That message, broadcast on a crackling radio, sparked a quiet revolution in his heart. He tuned in night after night, eventually finding the courage to reach out to the station. The technology is simple, but the impact is profound, turning living rooms and hidden rooms into places of worship and giving hope to those who once believed they were alone. In Afghanistan, the Christian movement has taken root in the most unlikely places. 20 years ago, known believers in the country could be counted on 2 hands. Today, underground networks connect thousands, and some estimates place the number well above 10,000, though no official count exists. These communities meet in secret, sometimes gathering in caves or remote homes, always mindful of the risks. Leaders rarely use their real names, relying on coded messages and trusted contacts to keep one step ahead of authorities and hostile neighbors. Despite the Taliban's return and the threat of a death for apostasy, the movement continues to grow, fueled by word of mouth and quiet courage. Sudan tells a different story, shaped by decades of conflict and shifting borders. Since the 1990s, reports from church networks and humanitarian groups suggest that millions have turned to Christianity, and some put the figure at 5 million, though the true number is impossible to verify. Here, conversion often happens in the aftermath of war, as people search for hope amid loss. In both countries, faith grows not through public campaigns or open invitations, but through whispered conversations and acts of kindness. The spread is uneven, hidden, and sometimes hard to measure, but its reach goes far beyond Iran's borders, touching every corner of the region. Today, the cost of belief can still mean exile, prison, or death across 13 nations. Yet the quiet exodus grows, challenging regimes and reshaping faith under immense risk. What compels someone to risk everything for conviction? Sometimes the most dangerous questions are the ones people refuse to stop asking.